Hello, my friend. How are you all?
I am wonderful. I think this is getting more and more interesting by the minute when we get
Eh,
the chance to meet some great, wonderful people with us in the series of webinars.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And today we are continuing and going to the second webinar about the book. As I mentioned in the first webinar, we invited some of the writers of the case studies for them to share in a very informal way. Okay, what are their thoughts about how do they see project management unfolding? And this time we have a very special guest that is Sarianna Bénain, and she is Senior Project Manager for SITA. And I want to invite her to share with us her experience. So uh, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be with you.
Yeah.
Ricardo, before you start asking Sarianna, I want to mention that the first time I met you know that she resides in Switzerland, and the first time we actually met was a PMI Switzerland invitation. So she and I, with another colleague, served on a panel. Also, he's from Switzerland and a contributor to the book, right? So I'm not going to put him on the spot here necessarily, but I think it was fantastic to see that the camaraderie and networking that comes from also some of the PMI events lead to contribution to publishing and expanding the views in the profession. So Sriana, that's what the price of being connected.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
that was a
it's
great experience.
fantastic.
That's great.
Yeah, it's fantastic for me also to be together, and I think this series of webinars it's just really a way for us to share experiences and to allow people to learn more and get some informal insights on what is the current thinking about what is coming in project management. But I want just to start because, of course, CETA is not, I would say, extremely known like a retail brand or like an auto manufacturer. But it's an incredible because I was reading during the time to write the book, I was reading about the massive presence in telecommunication for the air industry. And I want you to explain a little bit more about what CETA does, what your role and your background, just to introduce yourself to us.
Yes, so I'm a senior project manager at SITA. I've been working for SITA for more than 20 years. So SITA is a hidden giant serving the air transport industry or the air transport community. So our customers include airports, airlines, ground handlers, also governments, airplane manufacturers, etc. So we are really a niche player. I must say that in this webinar, I'm representing my own opinions and not my company's opinion. So I can't really talk officially for the company, just for my personal experience. So I've been a project manager most of the time that I've been at SITA for 20 years. So I've mixed roles from project management, program management, portfolio management. I've been in corporate PMO. I've been in a subdivisional PMO. I've been in continuous improvement, but most of the time in project management, where I really feel at home, and most of the time, really the vast majority, in customer facing projects. So we sell solutions to the customers and then they need to be implemented. So there are some variables there that are maybe not present in all project management, such as business case management, really the P&L management and contract management, which is something that creates more constraints than maybe internal projects.
That's great. That's great. Siriana, when I think about project management, and Ricardo and I'm not so sure we've asked that question to one another before. We think of project management as an ad hoc kind of profession that has developed, or how our journeys, his and mine, started in terms of getting in project management. However, I would love to hear about yours. How did you really get into this project management field? How was your journey like? leading into
yeah.
today. Yeah.
A little bit by accident. So I initially trained as a journalist. So I studied journalism and languages, and then I as a foreign correspondent, but by not really as an employee of a newspaper. I moved to Germany and started studying political sciences there to be able to report better from from the German political reality, let's say. And then at some point, I found that I wasn't earning enough money, and I wanted to change a little bit what I was doing, and I entered into the IT by accident, because there was a company who was offering a job creating the internal publications, actually, which was closer to what I did as a journalist. Then when I moved to France, this is also a little bit of this international stuff. I had difficulty with my Finnish diploma to find a job in France, so I did another diploma in France, and via that school, then I entered initially as an intern for half a year at SITA, and that's how I started. First managing an internal project implementing a Salesforce automation tool, and then via different changes, into this customer-facing project management.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can say it ad hoc or accidental. It sounds like fate in your case, right? So it's almost like every obstacle along the way was done for a reason.
Yeah, and I really see that the green, or the red thread, or the guideline, or the North Star has always been communication for me, because people say that project management is 80% communication, and that's really, I think, what has made my project management career fly, because the communication was natural to me. I had studied communication, and it just moved into a more structured approach via project management.
Fantastic. A case in point: communication. Well said. So listen, speaking of communication and speaking of SITA and some of the complex projects, I recall looking at my notes from your contribution to the book, you talk about integration projects being in airline industry and airport systems being unique. Can you tell us a little bit about the uniqueness there when it comes to integration and some of the learning, especially? Yeah.
So first of all, I firmly believe that projects are unique endeavors. That's how they are defined, right? It's a unique endeavor that has a definite start and definite end. So in that sense, every project is unique. Now, the integration projects are particularly unique because they have so many moving parts. When you integrate a system at an airport, you have so many stakeholders. You have ground handlers and airlines and suppliers of hardware and software and facilities, etc. And all of those need to be working seamlessly together. And at every airport, they have different suppliers, a different combination of suppliers, different technologies that are different stage of maturity or transformation. So it's a constantly moving environment where the individual components move. And adding to that, every component has a contractual relationship with another. So it really is quite complex. And if you think of people flying in an airplane, let's say a plane with 200 passengers, let's say, every one of them might have purchased their ticket through a different channel. One could have done it on an internet site for the airline. Another one uses a booking system, etc. So all those different stakeholders come to play when one integrates solutions at an airport.
And yet we only demand perfection, right? When we fly, we want everything to go smoothly. We don't care about all these connected dots that you have to take care of. So hopefully gives a lot of us an appreciation of that. That's great.
Yes, and there's a lot to do, because if one thinks, what all one could connect. So really the future vision is that when you start planning your journey from home, that one would also plug into this interconnectivity, the railways and the traffic and roadblocks and what have you, so that you would know that, okay, if you go on a Thursday, if you fly on Thursday from, let's say, Los Angeles to I don't know, Taipei, you better go take the train, because there's at that time there's traffic jam, etc., on the motorway, and the parkings are full, and therefore you would need 2 more hours to have a smooth journey and sip your favorite coffee in your favorite cafe, terminal, whatever,
Yeah.
So there's so much to do, in terms of integration. It's just getting more complex every day.
No, absolutely. And you talk about the role of technology as well, which is fantastic. Let's see, Ricardo, if you want to pull the thread a little bit further on that.
That is for me what I just heard. It's a absolutely fantastic type of business, and extremely subject to the VUCA environment. And one of the things that I saw in your case, that you mentioned the VUCA setup a couple of times, and I would love to hear you elaborating a little bit more on the VUCA and how teams they continue to excel at SITA in such a complex, volatile, complex, uncertainty scenario like the ones that you operate.
Yeah, the first time I heard about VUCA was, I think, in a seminar where Harold Kurtzner was the speaker. So I thought, like, wow, this puts words into what we're living every day. So I thought it really matched what's happening. Now, I think the most prominent example of VUCA is obviously the COVID that just hit us. But if you think a few years back, we have had similar situations. And maybe I'm a little bit biased, because I think the air transport industry is very much more, let's say, troubled by this sort of events. But we had the volcano eruption in Iceland, if you remember, some years ago. So the whole European airspace was quite disturbed by that. Then we had COVID, and right after COVID, we have the war in Ukraine. So all of this is highly impacting the air transport industry. So what does it mean for us? We need to especially the integration projects, they take a long time. They take 2 years to deliver, but they take also 2 years to contract. So you can imagine that when the customer, let's say a state-owned airport that needs to go through all sorts of hoops and requests for proposal, cycles, etc., starts to think about what the end solution would like to be. There's 4 years that go by before they have it in place. So how many things change in that 4 years? How many COVID crises can we have? How many times has technology changed, etc.? So it really is an incredible exercise of trying to adapt all the time over that long period of time to the change. And the challenge, which I also wrote about in the article, is that very often I find that especially in government owned sectors, where procurement is often quite a powerful player, the need for managing the change rapidly is not easy, or is not understood. So the challenge is to try to balance, let's say, traditional project management, because you'd have the contract and you have your revenue and P&Ls, etc., and you need to do change management. But at the same time, if you change manage every single sentence you do and comma and dot, etc., you only do change management and you don't actually deliver anything. You don't deliver the hard deliverables to the customer, but you don't deliver any value either. So that's I think where the challenge is, that this VUCA environment accelerates the change, and some really quite incredible changes that sort of like even invalidate contracts in some cases. So what do you do? Are you going to just stick to your traditional project management methods to make your to make sure that you don't spend the extra dollar of cost, so that you don't go over budget, etc., or do you try to innovate all the time? And I think what we need to do, at least in my environment, we do need to try to innovate all the time. So even if we don't have agile type of contracts with the customers, we try to do agile in every quarter we can, within the waterfall contract, etc. So it's a lot about adaptability, and I heard the word ambidextrity, which is quite good. One needs to be ambidextrous as well, or maybe two hands are not enough.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's perfect, and this drives me to my next question. Uh, what do you think, in your opinion, is the magic for a successful transformation? What would be the secret sauce on that?
I think that one characteristic that one needs to have is one needs to really have a lot of antennas. I see them like antennas on, you have to feel the how the people think, especially in intercultural environments. What makes them frustrated, what makes them happy, how you're going to make them trust you. And one do they want a lot of rigor and a lot of documentation, a lot of method, or do they want just a little bit of it? If they're allergic to it, can you hide? You need to do it anyway, right? But you need to make it look simple and easy, and so that it doesn't frustrate the customer. So I think you need to really feel the other party, so that you can adapt what you're doing so that they trust you. Right? And once they trust you, then you can help them do what they are not good at. I think that's the other thing. If in a traditional, like, black and white way of managing project, you're so stuck with your own. You want to be right. You want the other party to be wrong, and you need to manage your boundaries. But that's not necessarily a best way to provide value to the customer, be it internal or external. And that's why sometimes I feel that understanding the weaknesses of the other party and going the extra mile of trying to provide the thing that they are not so good at. If it's documentation, well, you do a little bit more documentation. It's if organization, you did a bit more organization. It's if it's I don't know, IT skills, you provide a little bit of more expertise, because then everybody wins at the end. Yeah.
Yeah. My goodness, lots of learning. And also, your write-up starts on page 404, I remember, in the book, right? So you landed in basically pillar number 9. This is the pillar talking about the PMO, the major disruptions in the PMO and some of the aspects of governance, which is fantastic to see. But also, when I hear the antennas, when I hear the heavy focus on adaptability, when you were talking earlier also about the amount of data and exchange of information that allows the passenger experience to totally be almost rethought through in the future, you really have a lot going on that has to do with the impact of digitization on how these projects and how these experiences are in the future as well. It cannot have come all of this without some challenges, I would say, Sarianna, right? So you make it sound like it goes all smoothly and you can simplify, and simplification is the answer. But can you tell us a little bit about some of the big challenges you learned from along the way, whether within the SITA world or prior to that, as you were leading your path into SITA?
Yeah, but I will always remember my first customer facing project, which was with a airplane manufacturer, and I had just been Prince 2 certified, and I was doing everything by the book, absolutely everything. So any problem I had, I went to the Prince 2, read manual. The pages were falling off the book because I was doing everything, and I was so happy with myself because I thought I was doing everything right. And at the end of the project, we had the project end review with the customer and lessons learned, and I asked them, well, what could have I done differently? And they said two things that really blew me off. The first one was that I should have had more colors on my slides. And I was like, come on, why didn't I ask them ever, what they thought about my steering committee slides, etc. They were saying there are too many words, not enough graphs. Since then I've always done graphs all my life. And the other thing they said that, you weren't here that often. We didn't see you, And I was thinking that I had been really efficient. I had gone to see the customer, taken the plane, every time it was needed. I didn't spend my time and money just wandering in the corridors and drinking coffee with them, which for me at the time was totally unproductive time. So it really struck me at the time that, even if you even if you deliver everything, every dot, and all your deliverables are in order, and everything is wonderful, the customer might not be happy, because they want something different. There's still this gap between like what you've delivered and the perceived value. And that was this unmeasurable fuzzy feeling of being cared for, whether it's with the colors on the slides, or drinking the coffee and wandering around the extra day here and there, so that they just feel cared. That was something that I learned in the first project. Another experience that was also learning from the customer, sometimes you have to bring bad news. So I had this one project with a European airline, and we had to bring very, very bad news to the customer. So we rehearsed, and there was my manager, who was at the time the portfolio manager. There was the account manager, so the commercial person for the airline, and me. And we had practiced, who says what, so that the who gets the blame, etc., doesn't destroy the customer relationship, and And I was the one who had to bring the bad news, because I was there just temporarily. Project is a temporary endeavor. So I wrote the bad news, and there was silence, absolute silence, and we were thinking like, what are they going to tell us? And then the first thing the customer said is, "What can we do to help you?"
Mm.
And I was like, oh, this was just such an incredible, demonstration of empathy, that the customer, who we were basically not serving as we had contracted, and was putting himself in our shoes and saying, we're in this together. So what can we do to help you, to help us? And to me, that was like mind blowing. I thought that, wow, this is something that I will never forget. I will always try to remember this, and with my future projects.
Sarianna, you're getting a lot of comments also, and Ricardo can share with us, where people are joining us from. But you got some comments on the importance of trust. You got comments about the value of the information you're providing, because in a way, if you think about the next generation project managers, given also the nature of life today and the high focus on utilization of digital and social media and everything else, we don't want to forget the fact that you do want to invest in the relationships, like you talked about. You had great examples about how you shifted also to better understand and better read the customer, which is really excellent. Yeah, as you know, you can do an awesome job as a project manager and then fail in terms of delivering what really is valuable to those customers. And speaking of that, sustainability is part of that challenge, right? So whether you talk about sustainability in its larger context and what it means to us individually and organizations, but also sustaining successes and sustaining the achievement of benefits out of some of your work and projects. I don't know what it means to you and your organization, but you can share with us a little bit the importance of that. I think that would be a good learning for our audience as well. Yeah.
So with sustainability, what do you mean exactly? Just environmental sustainability, or?
It's really, that's a challenge with it. So it means so many different things to different people. Ricardo, for example, comes from a world we have invested years in the humanitarian space, and I'm sure he could give you some insights there.
Yeah.
And the climate and everything else.
No, today, let me just jump in. Today, when I see when we talk about sustainability, most of the time we talk about ESG. We talk about environment. That is, I would say, the most obvious, but also the social impact that you are doing, and then the G comes from governance and some pieces of the economy and economical aspects. So, for example, just sharing you my experience. I led for 5 years the project management and infrastructure group at the United Nations. So, for example, when you go and we were typically, I would say, an infrastructure organization inside the UN. So when you go and build a maternity clinic, a hospital, a school, you are not just building walls and classrooms or bedrooms. No, you are trying to empower the economy and work on the social aspects and everything. So this is my view, and I think that this is the view that today most of the organizations are driving. Even now, less people are talking about the word sustainability and more people are talking about this more holistic concept involving this. So we would love to understand, how do you see this evolving in your business?
Well, first of all, just the environmental part obviously is hugely important, because just because before COVID, there was this movement of flight shame, and many people don't want to take planes anymore, and obviously that's what we get our salaries from. So it's really an important aspect, that environmental aspect, and well, again, I'm talking for myself, not really as a authorized person to talk about this aspect in my company, but we are a carbon neutral certified company. It's really a high focus on the company agenda. We try to make our products use less energy in all possible ways. So and it's important because people still want to go to places. COVID has taught us that we don't always need to take the plane to meet and greet, like we are here meeting virtually, and it's working just fine, which is great. But obviously, making air travel possible for more people in the world, is really important, because it makes the whole world more democratic, and that's also an important aspect, and making it easy. Now, in our projects, typically, we have things that we need to think about, is like, can a Mr. X use the systems that we put in place as a passenger? If you're checking in on an app or kiosk, how do we cater for different types of looks of people with biometrics? We always have to have, for example, kiosks that are accessible for people who use wheelchairs and things like that. So that sort of aspects are really like tangibly present in all our projects, especially where we have infrastructure. And obviously, the simplifying travel all along the way goes along those lines. But otherwise, in our project, in our company, let's say the social aspect we more do outside of the projects, I would say. So we have a lot of activities where we do things with the local communities, with refugees, with food, providing food for the poor, etc. So that sort of things we do, but they're not really related directly to the projects that we do, that are very often in this high-tech airport and airline customer environments.
Yeah, I have one question, because every time I'm listening to you, I start to try to envision how complex is to make all these pieces work for such a large company. And one thing that I would wonder is that, because your impact on traffic, or your impact on people's life is very, very relevant. For example, if you are implementing systems to improve the security of an airport, and this system does not work or stop working, then it may raise a massive issue nowadays. So how do you balance this? On one side, diverse groups. On one side, you have contractors, client side, technical area, governments, and this. On the other side, you have this massive changing environment that we see today, with different threats coming. Every day there is probably there will be millions of trials to get into your systems every single second, probably trying to get private data, trying to get who's inside the plane, trying to stop an airline from operating and ask for money. So how do you manage this? At the same time, the need to deliver this integration of this complexity, and at the same time, keep making sure that the business is safe on the project side.
Well, we, even though we control many parts in the chain, obviously we don't control everything, and there's a lot of governmental agencies and the airports themselves, responsible for a lot of things. But I'm not sure I'm really qualified to answer that point, but you obviously have to have very reliable and redundant systems, and depending on the system, the customers decide what sort of availability and redundancy they want to have, dependent on system criticity. And as you said, the messages that flow are probably most critical. But for example, if you can't do a self bag drop at an airport, is it that critical? You can go to the counter where somebody can take your bag. It's not a light stopper. Now obviously something like if you are parking your airplanes on the tarmac and something's wrong in the configuration, the wings start scratching each other or whatever, it's a bit annoying.
Yeah,
and probably causes a lot of problems, much more so than if a check-in counter is temporarily unavailable and the queue is a bit longer next door. So so every system also has its own criticity, and the chain is very long. So because there are so many, you have air traffic control that's independent from us. Then you have, the control of the air traffic controls, like in Europe, you have the Eurocontrol, and so many moving parts. Yeah, and they are not all so seamlessly connected yet. That's why there's a lot of bright future to make more integration happen.
Absolutely.
I think lots of learning, Ricardo, in the space of stakeholder engagement and stakeholder management and analysis. All those things that we think of as a minor, it's not a minor in this industry. So it's fantastic story.
Yeah, because I'm always thinking, just to give you an idea, Sarianna, in 2019, I flew more than 1 million miles. So probably I used indirectly your systems many times, and sometimes we think how all of these come together, right? How, an airport where planes take off every 30 seconds, and all the coming in, coming out, fuel, bag drop, and all security screening, checking, everything. This is an extremely complex and extremely volatile, because I was living in Denmark at the time of the Iceland volcano. And suddenly there's a volcano in Iceland, and then you say, what? And then suddenly, just everything collapse, and it's really very complex, and this is why I asked you to see how is the feeling of being a project manager in this kind of environment. So this would be, I would say, my final question. How do you feel when you sit, for example, tomorrow in your desk, and there is a project, and that so many people are relying on it,
well, I feel
from a finance, travel, whatever perspective. Yeah.
Well, I feel really privileged to be like behind the scenes and seeing how things happen. Like at one point I did some of the baggage projects. I love the baggage belts behind the scenes that, we normally normal passengers, we see the beautiful women or men, in their, hairdos and perfect makeup, and they take your bag and they smile and they speak all languages. But behind the scenes, you have these colossal men who drag your bags to the right place. It's a totally different world. It's noisy, it's dirty, and it's fascinating. And then indeed, in the airport management side, how do you configure and program everything so that the right passengers have the shortest way to go to the gate, and then the right plane is parked there, and you don't need to take the bus and cross half of the airport to go somewhere, and then your luggage is lost, etc. I think it's just totally fascinating, and every airport does things a little bit differently, which is also fantastic. So at one airport, for example, the ground handlers do much different tasks than in another, or they always serve the same airline. In another airport, they might mix. The check-in is done by one ground handler, and then the boarding is by another, and the third one looks whether there are oil spills on the tarmac, etc. It's every day you learn something more. So that's it's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Look, I thank you very much, Sarianna. So we are coming to the closing. So I want to hear from you and also from Al, your final comments before we wrap up this session. So starting from you, Sarianna, what is the key learnings from you that you wanted to share on the case with all of us?
Well, I strongly believe in this fast moving environment for project management where new skills are needed. So I think really we need to move as fast as the music does. But I still believe that when you start, you need to learn the trade, and you do need to follow your PMBOK or your Prince 2, etc., because you can only break free when you know the rules well. I think you still need a little bit of experience, and you need a few failures, and you need to go by the book before you can go beyond the book. That's my
Fantastic, fantastic.
It's hard.
Oh,
It's hard to top that, Ricardo. I think there's learnings in every corner of the contribution to the book and what we listened to today. I would say the examples she added today, Sarianna added a lot of examples to give us a different view of the sense of urgency as well, right? I mean, I learned a lot already in terms of, hey, there, it puts sense of urgency in a very different perspective, considering all the pieces that have to come together as we debated back and forth in our session. I think that's one, but also I'm sensing a lot the balance between technology, innovation, systems, but also the emotional intelligence part, right? When she talked a lot about the examples around trust, around the antennas, around the dealing with the multitude of agencies and entities and so forth, when you were asking some of the questions about safety and security as well. I think there's a lot there for the next generation project managers and for all of us to learn from. So Sarianna, it's been wonderful, and we are so thankful that you've contributed to this book. And I bet you in the next edition of the book, you're going to be in different chapters and contributing to different things. So I can already sense that.
He's already preparing you for the next one. But look, I will just reinforce what all said. I know. Look, for those who do not know, it's almost 11 p.m. It's 10:40 p.m. At Sarianna in Geneva, where Sarianna lives. So, Sarianna, thank you very much for your
Thank
time.
you.
First, for your time for writing the article, and your time for accepting our invitation. We really wanted to know your perspective on that. And thank you for this informal. For me, the key learning, I already took a note, is this one: project management is 80% communication. And that's so true, because when we are managing this multitude of stakeholders, if we do not do this well, it will just mess up everything. And I think this is one of the key learnings for me. Two final remarks. One thing is that we did that when Al and I decided to do this series. Wiley was very grateful with the idea, so they decided to do 20% off at the checkout. So if you are interested on the book, you can use this discount code to get this discount at wiley.com. And tomorrow we'll have another webinar, then Wednesday, and two next week, and the final one in the week after. So this month of September, we really decided to pick the 7 cases to discuss with you different dimensions. Last week we saw humanitarian. Today we're talking about technology in air transportation. Then we'll talk about a project management office tomorrow, then a hospital in the COVID Wednesday. So and so on. So this is exactly what is the intention. My dear Al, thank you very much for accepting this challenge, because we all are really busy with our lives and just to do that. But Sarianna, thank you one more time for being with us. Okay, we wish you all the best at SITA and your professional life. Okay, that you continue to be an example for us. Thank you very much. Dr. Al, thank you very much, my friend, and see you tomorrow in another webinar. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, people from Tunisia, Saudi Arabia, and I saw Brazil, I saw US, and several other countries. Thank you all for attending, okay? And see you tomorrow. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.